Good evening, dear friends. Before we settle into the quiet of this night, I want to welcome you with warmth and gratitude. Thank you for being here, for choosing a moment of peace in a world that asks so much of your time and energy. Wherever you are listening from, whatever kind of day you've had, I pray that this evening reflection feels like a soft place to rest your thoughts. Let your heart breathe as we step together into a gentle story about hope, humility, and the quiet kingdom God builds in us when the world grows dim. There was once a young believer named Elias who lived in a small town tucked between rolling hills and a slow-moving river. His days were simple and steady, filled with ordinary tasks that rarely changed. Opening his workshop at dawn, greeting neighbors as they passed, repairing whatever needed restoring, and returning home at dusk to the comforting glow of a single lantern in his window. He was not extraordinary, not widely known, not a person others sought for wisdom or counsel, but he carried within him a quiet longing he rarely spoke of. It rose in him during the early mornings when fog hovered over the fields, and again at night when the world seemed to hold its breath. He longed for something deeper than routine. He longed for God to speak to him, not with thunder or visions, but with clarity of purpose, with a sense of nearness he could touch with the heart. Yet despite this longing, Elias sometimes struggled with the same unspoken doubts that visit many souls. He wondered how one remained faithful in a world constantly shifting. He wondered how to stay rooted in hope when the noise of ambition and comparison seeped in. And he wondered how to surrender to God's kingdom, a kingdom that often moved quietly, almost invisibly, when everything around him seemed to reward louder things, faster things, more impressive things. One evening after a day that had left him unusually weary, he stepped outside to breathe the cool night air. The sky stretched wide above him, scattered with stars that glimmered like distant lamps hung in the heavens. He closed his eyes and whispered a small prayer, asking for peace, for steadiness, for faith that could withstand both the hollowness of disappointment and the weight of uncertainty. But no answer came, just the steady rhythm of the evening breeze brushing against the trees. Elias had always been fascinated by what happened in the quiet places, moments where nothing dramatic occurred, but where the heart suddenly stirred. He often thought of how God chose to enter the world not through palaces or proclamations, but through a small stable tucked away from the crowds. The thought humbled him. If the King of Heaven chose simplicity and silence as the doorway to salvation, perhaps his own heart could learn to welcome God in simpler ways too. That night, after closing up the workshop, he walked farther than usual, drawn by the stillness settling over the hills. As he moved along the narrow path, he noticed how the fading light softened every edge of the landscape, turning even ordinary stones into shapes of beauty. Something within him relaxed. The noise of the day, the pressure he had carried, the inner tension he could not fully name, all of it began to loosen its grip. It was then he remembered a passage from the prophet Daniel, a vision of beasts that embodied the powerful, the proud, the dominant forces of the world. But above those terrors, seated in calm authority, was the ancient one whose reign outlasted every kingdom built on fear, noise, and ambition. And then came another figure, humble yet radiant, one like a son of man, to whom everlasting dominion was given. Elias had always loved that image. It reminded him that the greatest kingdom was one the world could not measure, a kingdom rooted in truth, humility, and surrender. Even when the world roared like beasts, God's quiet kingdom remained steady. As he reached the crest of a small hill, Elias sat upon a smooth stone and gazed across the valley. Lights flickered in the houses below, tiny signs of life continuing quietly beneath the great canopy of the night. He felt small, but not in a way that troubled him. It felt comforting, as though being small meant he did not have to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. The burdens of proving himself, of achieving enough, of securing his future, those were heavy beasts of their own kind. But here, with the stars above and the earth beneath him, He could sense the soft whisper of a deeper kingdom, a kingdom where trust mattered more than accomplishment, where humility mattered more than recognition, where peace mattered more than control. He closed his eyes and tried to imagine what it meant to make room for Christ's reign within himself. Not in grand gestures, but in the quiet ways that only God could see. It struck him that the kingdom of God often arrives disguised as small choices. The way one speaks kindly when frustrated, the way one chooses patience over haste, the way one listens instead of argues, the way one forgives instead of holding on to hurt. These were small, almost invisible acts. But perhaps that was the point. God often worked through what seemed small to the world but was large in the eyes of heaven. As the wind shifted, Elias felt something stir in his heart. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a revelation. It was simply a gentle settling, like dust after a storm. A quiet truth formed in him, that God's kingdom was already near, already growing, already whispering through the small hidden corners of his ordinary life. His role was not to make something grand, but simply to make room. Room in his habits, room in his thoughts, room in his expectations, room in his heart. He inhaled deeply, and for the first time that day, his breath didn't feel tight. He whispered another prayer, not of request this time, but of surrender. He didn't ask for clarity or answers. He simply offered himself, small as he was, ordinary as he felt. There in the quiet, under the watchful sky, he asked God to reign in him in whatever way God desired. A strange and peaceful warmth touched his spirit then, subtle and soft. It didn't erase his uncertainties, but it made them less heavy. It didn't remove his questions, but it reminded him that questions were not barriers to faith. They were bridges. He rose from the stone and began the walk back to town. The night seemed even more still than before, filled with an unspoken promise that God was near, even when unseen. As he passed familiar houses, he felt a tender affection for the people who lived within them. Some he knew well, others not at all, but all were souls trying to make sense of their days, trying to find peace in their own ways. He prayed silently for them as he walked, asking God to bless them, to comfort them, to guide them gently as he guided him. When he finally reached his home and lit his lantern, Elias felt a quiet gratitude rise in him. The day had not been perfect. He had felt tired, uncertain, and stretched thin. Yet here he was, ending the night with a softer heart than he began it with. Something sacred had unfolded within him, not through noise or spectacle, but through the small, unnoticed whisper of God's kingdom moving gently in the night. As he lay down to rest, he felt a new steadiness in his spirit. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, its own noise, its own uncertainties, but he felt ready, not because he had found all the answers, but because he had rediscovered the truth he already carried, that God's kingdom endures, gentle and unshakable, even when all else fades. Morning brought a softness that wrapped itself around the town like a quiet blessing, and Elias sensed it the moment he stepped outside. The breeze was gentle, carrying the scent of dew-drenched grass and the faint sweetness of pine drifting from the hills. He walked to his workshop with a stillness lingering in his chest, a remnant of the peace that had settled over him the night before. Though he knew the day ahead would be filled with its usual demands, he felt as though he were carrying a small lantern within him, its glow faint, but steady enough to guide his steps. As he opened the workshop door, the familiar creak greeted him like an old friend. Sunlight spilled through the window, illuminating the wooden benches, the scattered tools, and the unfinished work waiting for him. Nothing had changed outwardly, yet something inside him had shifted. He found himself working more slowly, not from tiredness, but from intention, as though each task deserved a moment of gratitude. He felt grounded, not by the weight of responsibilities, but by the quiet certainty that God's kingdom moved through the small details of the day, just as surely as it moved through the vastness of the night sky. Throughout the morning, townspeople visited the workshop with small requests: a chair to be mended, a loose board to be straightened, a latch that no longer closed properly. These were simple tasks, the kind most craftsmen could perform with half their attention. But Elias completed each one with care, letting the rhythm of his hands become a prayer of its own. He found himself noticing details he might otherwise overlook. The way the grain of the wood curved like miniature rivers, the warmth of sunlight on his shoulders, the familiar hum of activity in the street just outside. By midday, the town had grown livelier. Neighbors greeted each other with nods, children chased one another down the cobblestone path, and the bakery released the warm scent of fresh bread into the air. Elias felt a deep affection for the life pulsing around him, even though it didn't belong to him in some grand or dramatic way. He was part of it simply by being present, by doing what he could with the small corner of the world entrusted to him. Still, as the hours passed, Elias felt a gentle tug inside him, a quiet reminder of the deeper longings he carried. He wasn't dissatisfied with his work or his life. He simply knew there was more to faith than routine. There was a call hidden within the quiet, a whisper urging him to remain attentive to God's movement in ways that weren't always visible or measurable. In the late afternoon, after the last customer had left, Elias took a short walk to clear his thoughts. The sun hovered low in the sky, casting long shadows that stretched across the fields. He found himself returning to the same hill where he had sat the night before. Something about that place had awakened a stillness within him, and he hoped returning to it might help him understand the stirring in his soul. As he climbed the hillside, he noticed the way the landscape glowed under the warm light of the setting sun. The hills rose and fell gently, wrapped in a quiet majesty that calmed him. When he reached the top, he sat upon the same stone and let the evening settle around him. The sky was beginning to shift, the colors melting from gold to deep orange, then slowly drifting towards shades of purple and blue. Elias closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The peace he felt the night before returned, but this time it came with a deeper sense of surrender. He thought again about Daniel's vision, about the beast that symbolized the powerful forces of the world, forces that often felt overwhelming or impossible to confront. But he also remembered the Ancient One, steady and eternal, seated above all of them. The vision reminded him that human forms of power, noise, pride, ambition, control, would eventually crumble. Only the kingdom of God endured. He opened his eyes and looked out across the valley. Life continued below, the ordinary rhythms of people preparing for evening, unaware of the quiet conversation taking place within one man's heart. Elias reflected on how small his own life felt compared to the vastness of the world. Yet he sensed that the kingdom of God moved through smallness far more than through grand displays. A humble heart had room for God. A self-focused heart did not. As twilight deepened, Elias felt a gentle prompting in his spirit, an invitation to examine the parts of his life where pride or fear still had too much influence. He thought about the subtle comparison he sometimes felt when he looked at others who seemed more accomplished or more certain in their past. He thought about the old wounds that made him cautious, the moments he held back kindness out of fear of being misunderstood, the quiet resentments he kept tucked away even though he wished he could release them. These inner movements, small as they were, felt like the beasts in Daniel's vision, rising quietly but persuasively, urging him toward the kingdom of self instead of the kingdom of God. He knew letting go would not happen in a single night, but acknowledging what lived in his heart was a beginning, a small beginning, but a true one. He whispered a silent promise to God, a promise to welcome the work of transformation, even if it happened slowly, even if it meant surrendering in ways that made him uncomfortable. He asked for humility, not the kind that diminished his worth, but the kind that opened his heart. By the time Elias rose from the stone, darkness had settled completely over the hills. Stars began to flicker into view one by one, casting their quiet light across the sky. He walked home slowly, letting the calm of the night wrap around him. When he reached his door, he hesitated for a moment, sensing that he was stepping into a new chapter of his life, one not marked by dramatic changes, but by deeper openness. He lit his lantern, washed his hands, and sat by the window, watching the movement of the stars above the rooftops. Something about the night filled him with gratitude, not for anything he had done, but for everything God was doing quietly within him. The kingdom of God was growing in him like a seed in fertile soil, not loud, not sudden, but steady. He rested his head on his hand and allowed the stillness to linger. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, its own opportunities to choose humility over pride, surrender over control, peace over anxiety. But he felt ready to face them with a steadier spirit. Before extinguishing the lantern, he lifted one simple thought to heaven, a thought of surrender, of trust, of hope that God would continue shaping him in the quiet ways that mattered most. He climbed into bed and let sleep take him gently, held by the knowledge that God's kingdom was near. Near in the night, near in the silence, near in the hidden corners where the soul learns to see. The next day began with clouds drifting lazily across the sky, soft and weightless, like thoughts that had not yet settled into meaning. Elias woke slowly, feeling the subtle ache of yesterday's reflections lingering in his chest. Not painful, but tender, like a reminder that transformation happened not only through moments of clarity, but also through the quiet, gradual work of the heart learning to yield. He dressed and stepped outside, feeling the cool morning air touch his face. The world seemed quieter than usual, as though the sky itself was listening. Elias made his way to the workshop, but before reaching the door, he paused when he saw an elderly neighbor standing by her fence, struggling with a basket that appeared too heavy for her frame. Her name was Miriam, a widow who lived alone on the edge of town. She was known for her kindness and for the way she remembered every birthday, every name, and every passing joy or sorrow in the neighborhood. Without hesitating, Elias walked toward her and offered his help. She smiled gratefully, relief softening the worry in her eyes. As he lifted the basket, he noticed how light it actually was, far lighter than her struggle had suggested. He realized it wasn't the weight, but her weariness that made the task difficult. As they walked together to her doorstep, she spoke quietly about how the days had grown longer for her since her husband had passed, how the tasks he used to do now fell entirely on her shoulders, and how loneliness sometimes made every small burden feel heavier. Elias listened, saying little, offering nothing more than his presence. When they reached her home, she touched his arm gently, her gratitude shining more brightly than words could express. As he walked away, he realized something important. Kindness, even in its smallest form, had a quiet way of easing the heaviness others carried. It was a part of the kingdom of God that often went unnoticed, but it was powerful nonetheless. Back at the workshop, Elias thought about Miriam and her quiet resilience. Her story echoed something he had been pondering over the last 2 days. The idea that God's kingdom began in unnoticed places. People rarely spoke of loneliness or the weariness hidden beneath their daily routines. They simply carried on, meeting their responsibilities while longing for someone to see them. Elias wondered how many others in town bore silent struggles that could be lightened with a small gesture of compassion. As he worked through the morning, his thoughts drifted to the deeper fears and insecurities he kept hidden, even from himself. He thought about how those inner beasts, pride, fear, comparison, doubt, tried to convince him that his worth depended on achievement or recognition. But when he reflected on Daniel's vision again, he remembered how all the grand creatures, symbols of power and intimidation, eventually faded before the eternal presence of the Ancient One. It was a reminder that nothing built on fear or pride could endure. Only the kingdom of God, rooted in humility and truth, could stand forever. By early afternoon, rain began to fall, soft but steady, tapping gently against the workshop window. Elias paused his work and stepped outside, letting the cool drops touch his face. The rain softened the edges of the world, blurring the distinction between earth and sky. He felt the kind of peaceful melancholy that came with rainy days, the kind that invited introspection and quiet surrender. He walked through town with no destination in mind, watching as people hurried to find shelter or pulled their cloaks tighter around themselves. He passed the bakery, where warm light glowed behind fogged windows. He passed the church, where candles flickered faintly through stained glass. He passed the small river that ran through the heart of town, its surface rippling under the gentle fall of rain. Eventually, he found himself heading toward the town's outskirts again, drawn by the memory of yesterday's peace. The hill awaited him, though the path was now slick with mud. Each step required attention, but Elias welcomed the slowness. He felt as though the rain was washing something within him as well. Old worries, stubborn expectations, the lingering pressure to be more than what God asked him to be. When he reached the top of the hill, the world looked different. The air was heavy with the scent of wet soil, and the valley below shimmered with a soft mist rising from the earth. The rain softened everything, turning sharp lines into gentle curves. Elias sat on the familiar stone again, but this time he didn't close his eyes. Instead, he watched the rain fall steadily, creating small patterns on the ground. It occurred to him that rain was one of God's gentlest gifts. It didn't rush, it didn't demand, it simply fell, softly, consistently, patiently. And yet, over time, it could transform landscapes, soften hardened ground, and bring life where there had been dryness. Perhaps the work God was doing in him was like that, quiet and patient, reshaping him slowly through moments of surrender. As he sat there, Elias felt the presence of God in a way he couldn't fully explain. Not as a voice, not as a vision, but as a steady warmth that settled deep within him. It felt like a reminder that God was not asking him to understand everything or to conquer every inner beast at once. God was simply asking him to be open, to let grace fall gently upon him, to trust the slow work of transformation. He took a slow breath, letting the rain wash over the surface of his soul. The burdens he had carried, the doubts, the comparisons, the quiet insecurities, felt a little lighter. He knew they might return, but he also knew they did not have the final word. The kingdom of God had already begun in him, like a seed sprouting beneath the soil, unseen but powerfully alive. After some time, Elias rose from the stone. The rain had eased into a mist, and the clouds were beginning to break apart, revealing soft patches of sky. As he walked back toward town, he felt a peace within him that he hadn't known in a long time. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but he felt ready to meet it with humility and trust. When he reached his home, he lit his lantern and placed it by the window once more. The small flame flickered gently, casting warm light across the room. Elias felt drawn to sit beside it, listening to the fading patter of rain on the roof. The lantern's glow reminded him of the quiet light he carried within, small but unwavering. He reflected on how each day had brought him a little deeper into surrender. Not dramatic surrender, not the kind written in stories of heroes, but ordinary surrender, the kind that unfolded in small choices, in simple acts of kindness, in moments of quiet reflection, in letting go of what he could not control. It was the shape of a heart learning to trust. As he prepared for rest that night, he felt no need to ask for answers. Instead, he simply offered a thought of gratitude for the gentle ways God had met him. In the quiet of the night, in the stillness of the hills, in the rain that softened his heart, and even in the simple act of helping a neighbor. He lay down and let the night wrap around him, peaceful and steady. And in that stillness, he felt God's kingdom drawing even nearer, whispering that love was already at work in him, quietly reshaping him into someone who could reflect its light. The next morning rose with a pale gold tenderness, the kind of light that made the world look freshly washed. Elias woke with a sense of clarity resting gently on his heart. The storm of yesterday had left something behind, not just the scent of rain in the air, but a quiet strength within him, as though the soft downpour had seeped into the unseen spaces of his spirit and watered something waiting to unfold. He stepped outside and breathed in deeply. The world felt more spacious than usual, as if the sky itself had stretched open to welcome him. As he walked through town, he noticed how the earth glistened beneath the soft morning sun, and how the people moved with a subtle calm after the cleansing rain. He felt almost as if he could see the burdens lifted from their shoulders, perhaps not entirely gone, but lighter, more bearable. When Elias reached the workshop, he paused at the doorway. He had always entered that place with the meticulous focus of someone who took pride in precision, but today he entered with gratitude instead. He felt the tools on the shelves were no longer symbols of obligation, but invitations to create, to shape, to serve. His hands no longer carried the weight of expectation. Instead, they carried a humble desire to offer whatever work God asked of him. As he began his tasks, he moved with a sense of flow he hadn't felt in years. Each movement carried intention, but not pressure. Each task felt meaningful, even when it was simple. For the first time, he realized that surrender did not weaken discipline. It deepened it. Surrender allowed him to work not from fear of failure, but from love of purpose. His craft had become part of his prayer. Throughout the morning, Elias noticed how often thoughts of others came to mind. Neighbors he passed daily, people who carried hidden sorrows, strangers whose stories were unknown, yet no less real. His heart felt more open to them, more tender. He realized that as God softened his inner landscape, he had become more able to see the humanity in every face. Compassion had birthed clarity. By midday, the workshop door opened gently, and a young boy stepped inside. Elias recognized him as the baker's son, a quiet child with thoughtful eyes. The boy held a broken wooden toy in his hands. Its legs snapped, its paint chipped. He didn't speak, but his hopeful gaze said enough. Elias knelt beside him, studying the toy with care. The break was clean, simple to repair. As he worked, the boy watched with wide, trusting eyes. Elias felt something warm bloom in his chest, a realization that sometimes the smallest things were the most sacred. A broken toy in a child's hands held more meaning than a grand commission. When he finished repairing it, the boy's joy was quiet but profound, and he hugged the toy to his chest as he left the workshop. Elias stood in the doorway after the boy left, watching him run down the street. Something about that small moment remained with him. It was a reminder that God's kingdom was not distant, hidden somewhere beyond reach. It was already here, in restored joy, in unnoticed kindness, in simple acts that healed hidden places in people's hearts. Later in the afternoon, as the sun climbed higher, Elias felt drawn to walk again. He followed the path leading out of town, the one lined with tall grasses, still damp from yesterday's storm. He walked slower this time, not because he was tired, but because he wanted to notice everything. How the light filtered through the trees, how the breeze whispered through the leaves, how the world felt like a cathedral made without hands. He reached the hill once more, sensing that there was still something there for him. As he climbed, he realized how different he felt from the first day he had walked this path. Then he had been restless. Yesterday, he had been searching. Today, he walked with a heart more open than he had ever known. At the top, he sat again on the familiar stone, and this time the view made him inhale with wonder. The valley stretched beneath him, washed in sunlight, but what caught his heart was the sense of belonging that settled gently over him. The world felt vast, yet he felt held. Nothing about his life had changed externally. He had no new achievements, no grand revelations, yet everything within had shifted. It was as though God had carved a spacious place inside him, where worry once lived. Elias reflected on how easily the world convinced people to chase greatness. So many spent their days striving for recognition, longing to be seen, to be admired, to be validated by titles or accomplishments. But the vision of the Ancient One had shown him something different. All earthly power eventually faded. Empires crumbled. Achievements were forgotten. Only the quiet kingdom of God endured, a kingdom built on humility, compassion, surrender, and trust. He thought again of Bishop Sheen's words about the inn, how the world made no room for Christ because it was too loud, too busy, too absorbed in its own importance. And he wondered how often he too had had no room for God, not because he rejected him, but because he filled the inn of his heart with noise, ambition, comparison, and distraction. Yet God had not abandoned him for that. Instead, God had gone to the stable within him, the quiet, humble place, and begun his work there. As Elias contemplated these things, a gentle breeze brushed across his face, carrying with it a whisper of peace. He felt a quiet invitation from God, not to do more, but to be more present, more open, more surrendered. It was an invitation to trust that his life did not need to be extraordinary for God to use it. His daily surrender was enough. Elias sat in silence for a long while, letting the truth settle deeply. He knew now that surrender was not a single moment, but a daily decision. It was choosing humility over pride, love over fear, faith over control. It was allowing God to shape him in ways he did not always understand. It was letting go of what weighed him down so that he could make room for the one who had been knocking gently on the door of his heart all along. As the afternoon light softened, Elias rose. He felt lighter, almost as if part of him had been unclenched. He walked down the hill slowly, feeling each step as a prayer. He returned home with gratitude blooming quietly inside him, steady and warm. That night, Elias lit his lantern once more, the small flame flickering gently in the dark. He sat beside it, letting its glow fill the quiet room. He realized how much this tiny flame had come to symbolize for him. It was steady, humble, small, yet warm enough to chase away the shadows. It reminded him that a single light, when held faithfully, could change the entire atmosphere. As he prepared to rest, his heart felt peaceful and awake. The darkness outside no longer felt intimidating because he carried a light within, one that no storm, no worry, no uncertainty could extinguish. God's kingdom was alive in him, growing in silent places, illuminated by trust. He closed his eyes, letting the stillness settle as gently as snowfall. And there, in that quiet moment, Elias felt the presence of God not as a distant king, but as a companion who had walked every step with him, shaping him into someone new. The final morning of Elias's quiet transformation arrived with a soft whisper of dawn, the sky painted in pale rose and gentle gold. He woke before the light fully broke, sensing without explanation that something within him was ready to be understood, something that had been quietly unfolding over the past days like a seed stirring beneath the soil. The air held a peaceful stillness, as though creation itself paused to honor the slow, holy work God had been doing inside him. Elias rose and stepped outside, feeling the lingering coolness of night on his skin. The town was silent, its homes still wrapped in sleep, their windows dark and calm. He walked through the empty streets with unhurried steps, letting his mind drift across all that had happened. The stirring restlessness of the first day, the comforting silence of the hills, the cleansing rain, the neighbors whose burdens had softened under simple kindness, the quiet beauty of the small lantern's glow. Each moment, once scattered, now felt like pieces of a single story God had been weaving gently into his heart. He passed Miriam's home and saw a small candle burning at her window. It flickered faintly but faithfully, much like his own lantern. The sight warmed him. He had not realized how much impact their brief interaction had made until now. Sometimes he understood the smallest gestures echoed far beyond the moment they occurred. Miriam had found a way to hold on to hope, and perhaps he had been a small part of that. As he made his way toward the outskirts of town once more, the sun slowly rose behind him, casting long, soft shadows across the path. Elias felt drawn toward the hill a final time, not out of habit, but because something in him wanted to stand once more in that place where sky and earth met, where his heart had opened in ways he never expected. He climbed the familiar path, but today he walked with no weight on his shoulders. Each step felt natural, simple, grounded, as though his heart and feet moved in harmony. When Elias reached the top, he stopped. The valley stretched beneath him, but today it felt alive in a new way. The sunlight revealed details he had not noticed before: the curve of fields, the shimmer of distant water, the gentle sway of trees waking in the morning breeze. Everything felt connected, part of a vast tapestry woven by a hand far greater than his own. He sat once more on the stone that had become a place of prayer, a quiet sanctuary far from the noise of everyday life. As he watched the world awaken, Elias reflected on the subtle, powerful changes that had unfolded within him. He realized how often he had looked for God in grand gestures, waiting for dramatic signs or clear visions. Yet in these days, God had met him in the simplest moments: in rain falling on quiet soil, in the weight of a neighbor's burden, in the trust of a child, in a lantern's small flame, in silence that softened the heart like gentle waters smoothing stone. God had not thundered. He had whispered, and Elias had finally learned to listen. He closed his eyes as sunlight warmed his face. Inside him, a gentle clarity rose. God had been teaching him not just to pray, but to live prayerfully, to see every ordinary moment as a place where God's kingdom drew near, to understand that surrender was not losing control, but letting grace reshape what fear had hardened, to trust that his worth came not from what he achieved, but from the one who loved him before he ever lifted a hand to work. As Elias sat in that peaceful stillness, he felt a deep understanding settle within him like a soft revelation. He realized that the true beasts described in Daniel, the ones that symbolize power, ambition, fear, and pride, were not distant creatures of ancient visions alone. They lived in the human heart, rising when one struggled to control instead of trust, when one tried to build kingdoms of their own making instead of yielding to the kingdom of God. And the Ancient One, whose presence outlasted every empire, was not simply enthroned in the heavens, but was seated on the throne of every open heart. Elias breathed deeply, letting the truth wash through him. The world around him might still be filled with noise, ambition, and distractions, but he carried something stronger now: an inner stillness shaped by God's patient love, a steady kingdom built not on power, but on humility, not on recognition, but on surrender, not on striving, but on trust. When he finally rose from the stone, he felt no sense of ending, only continuation. His life in town would look the same to anyone watching, yet everything within him had shifted. He would return to the workshop, to familiar tools and familiar rhythms, but now his work would be prayer. His interactions would be compassion. His days would be shaped by a kingdom the world could not see but could always feel through the way he lived. As he made his way down the hill, Elias felt a profound gratitude. God had not transformed him through grand miracles, but through quiet invitations, through gentle, persistent grace, through the slow opening of a heart that had been too long occupied by fear and perfectionism. He now understood that spiritual growth was not about becoming someone extraordinary, but about becoming someone available to God, to others, to the quiet movements of love that shaped the ordinary world. Returning to town, Elias greeted the people he passed with warmth he hadn't known before. His heart felt spacious, ready to hold the stories, sorrows, and hopes of others without being overwhelmed. He walked into his workshop with a smile that rose naturally, a smile born of peace rather than effort. The tools gleamed softly in the morning light, waiting to be used with purpose and gentleness. Before beginning his work, Elias lit his lantern and placed it beside the window. Its glow joined the sunlight streaming in from outside, small but steady. He realized that the lantern represented more than illumination. It represented the quiet choice to carry light wherever darkness might try to settle. It was a symbol of the kingdom of God alive in ordinary lives, shining through those who allowed their hearts to be shaped by surrender and love. As the day unfolded and Elias moved through his tasks, he felt a harmony between his inner life and outer actions. He no longer separated prayer from work, silence from service, spiritual reflection from daily responsibilities. Everything flowed together in a gentle rhythm, like a single river carrying many streams. And within that flow, he felt God near, not distant, not hidden, but present in every heartbeat, every breath, every act of kindness, every moment of surrender. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky deepened into shades of violet and gold, Elias stepped outside once more. He looked at the peaceful town, at the windows beginning to glow with the warmth of lanterns and candles. He felt connected to each household, each person, each story. He felt part of a family he had not noticed before, a family held together by God's quiet grace. As he stood under the darkening sky, Elias reflected on what these days had taught him. He understood now that God's kingdom did not sweep in with force, but grew quietly in surrendered hearts. He understood that peace was not the absence of storms, but the presence of trust. He understood that the world's noise would always try to drown out the whisper of God. But for those who listened, that whisper was enough to guide a lifetime. He closed his eyes and whispered his own final prayer, one of gratitude, surrender, and readiness. When he opened his eyes again, the first stars were beginning to appear. And for the first time, Elias felt that he too was shining. Thank you for being here, dear friends. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, subscribe to the channel, and comment below with your reflections or prayer intentions. May God bless you and keep you always.